What is up, everybody? This is Alex from IHE TV. To be or not to be? So I'm talking about Hamnet, Chloe Zhao's latest movie. She's known for her slow and minimalist character studies and The Eternals. This kind of screamed Oscar bait to me, and it is in some ways, but there's a lot to like about this movie. And about an hour and 15 minutes of it, I adored it, actually, that section of it. And I'll get into more detail on what happens after that in a spoiler section later in the video, but first let's talk about what's good and bad in generalities. So what, Hollywood's making prequels for Shakespeare now? What? So Paul Mescal obviously is playing Shakespeare here. It's not a grand reveal or hidden from the audience. A lot of what happens in the story you kind of know going in, which gives it a sense of dread. I mean, the first line of the description here is after losing their son Hamnet to plague. That framing and going in with that was quite interesting to me. You see the burgeoning relationship with the focus on Jessie Buckley, who's pretty incredible in this with the material. I think it's quite likely she's going to win an Oscar for this. Outside of obviously being based on the real person, this is based on a novel as well, which might be where some of the issues come from later on for me. Because as far as the framing is concerned, I love the period piece nature, seeing these old buildings, these old towns, old London. Any film that can sell a different era of time is endlessly thought-provoking and interesting to me, especially with Jessie Buckley's being this sort of witch doctor with this deep connection to the environment with her hawk and all this woodland imagery, which is a nice, consistent visual through line, which feeds back into that dread I was getting at with this recurring imagery of doorways and darkness. I've always liked that, the idea of using doorways metaphorically. This film does a good job of doing that. It's not quite Tokyo Story, but it does foreshadow the overbearing tone of the movie nicely, with this sort of cave being used early on, with you knowing where it's going with like the most horrendous concept possible. I'm not even a parent, and it's still obviously a disturbing, horrifying idea of losing a child to something that you have such a tiny amount of control over, something as scary and existential as the plague, which is a frightening period of history. You get to see a little bit of the plague doctors and the response to that in London. And I guess the implication is that it's probably William who brings it to them. I thought the chemistry between the family before things fall apart was really likable and solid. The performance is really nice. You get to see a nice range of emotion from both these characters, falling for each other, the tension between the families. I really liked his use of storytelling to kind of woo her with his Orpheus and the underworld story, with that being one of the big swings that the film is trying to explore. The idea of a grief so intense and channeling that atrocious energy into something creative and communicating something through that and processing your greatest pains into some kind of expression and how that can potentially bring people together. I think where it goes with that is pretty clumsy, but the build-up and the setting I really like. The framing and the costumes are all top-notch. Obviously, children are a big part of the movie, and it's a lot to ask of these young actors to deliver something of such high intensity, such high emotion, and you're never pulled out of the movie from any of the children performances, with the standout being this Jacoby kid, who is ridiculously good. Like, I don't know what he's been through in order to get this performance out, but how old is he? 12 years old. He would have been younger when it was shot, I assume. That's incredible. Great casting. Even the supporting characters, like Emily Watson, has a small part to play, but a memorable performance and a nice perspective that I kind of wish there was more of, considering how her experiences kind of mirror Jessie Buckley's in certain ways. You never really see them interact over it. I guess it's supposed to contrast different attitudes or something. Yeah, all the performances are great. Also, as I'm recording this, I'm listening to the soundtrack by Max Richter. I feel like everyone knows that song on the Edge of Daylight, which does feature in the movie. But the music in the first half in particular I thought really worked well. It is kind of gentle, but also foreboding. These ominous vocals humming in the background. It creates a nice atmosphere. And I guess it still isn't really a spoiler yet, but the scene where it happens is a powerhouse of a scene. It's incredibly emotionally effective. Everyone is at their A game. It even kind of subverts becoming melodramatic with this ongoing thing with Shakespeare obviously being in London and not being there for certain events. and his kind of understated reaction was surprising and interesting to me and thought-provoking. And while I don't fully love what they do with the Shakespeare character, Paul Mescal, it does deliver an excellent performance. Some nice dialogue in that first half when Emily Watson is talking about what is given may be taken away at any time. When Jessie Buckley is talking about how Will is caught in that place in his head. It was kind of getting better and better and more interesting to me as it was going along, up until that scene, the scene. Then after that kind of emotional release, I feel like the film struggles to find a way to take the story or wrap it up or take it in a direction that is as interesting. Because I think what it wants to do is to kind of break your heart halfway through and then leave you uplifted or contrast against that extreme emotion in the opposite direction. And what they have to do to get there is just, sorry to say, a little bit hammy nut. So I'm going to talk about spoilers now. It's kind of funny to say that you can spoil this because of what we're talking about here, but here's your warning anyway. So I mentioned some of the foreshadowing being good, like the general kind of more surreal imagery of just the darkness of the doorways and the cave and whatnot. Sometimes when it will focus on Shakespeare in London, and there's a scene, for example, where he goes and sees what's happening with the plague, and he wanders over to a little light show that's happening, which I thought was way too on the nose as far as obvious foreshadowing, and just felt like, okay, we're kind of pushing this a little bit now. And yeah, I'm really here for Jessie Buckley perspective and character, because there's a dangerous game you're playing with including somebody as ubiquitous as Shakespeare, and the way you go characterizing him or trying to capture that eureka moment as far as him taking his pain and writing it into his own stories that everybody knows, and that's really where the film struggles on an emotional level when it gets to the play scene towards the end, where the way they're trying to express this concept of, turning your pain into some kind of art and that being a way to communicate in the context of a partnership or a marriage. The execution of this scene is really corny, let alone earlier in the movie where Shakespeare literally goes to the water by the pier and says out loud to be or not to be. And that was kind of cringeworthy, groan-worthy, especially contrasted with how sincere all the character work and the human emotion is before that point. That really was a, oh no, kind of moment for me, because as I say, that first kind of hour, 15 minutes was genuinely like a 4-star kind of film for me. Like if it could have maintained that. I really think the move would have been to minimize the Shakespeare side of it as much as possible, with him leaving for work so regularly. That kind of gives you a perfect excuse to stay locked to Jessie Buckley and characterize her and give her more of a arc that doesn't feel like it's kind of swapping over to being like, and that's how Shakespeare came up with the story. And it feels like just watching scenes from Hamlet with Agnes just kind of existing in the crowd and screaming and going through this whole journey in a way that it just clashes. It just doesn't really work on an emotional level or character level for me. So yeah, it's kind of a shame when it is weighted this way round, where I just don't get on with the ending, because that's the full stop. That's what you're going to remember most, as opposed to a weaker beginning or opening. But it's not a wash for me. It's just more kind of unfortunate with how that wraps up. But I don't know, that might work for you. It's not really my kind of thing. That was more of a, this is more understandably Oscar baity. Oh, here was the shadow puppetry scene I was talking about. Too sort of literal. I just think this as an image perfectly encapsulates everything in a much more subtle, creative way that actually is enforced by her character and her reputation. When there are slight dashings of surrealism, it kind of made me feel that would have been a way to communicate some of these feelings or the idea of what this play scene is getting at without it kind of being silly, without changing the nature of the story too much. But so many good shots. I love the lighting, lots of natural light sources. And I'll wrap up this video by addressing some of the things that was said on the Sardonicast episode I was on where this film came up, and I hadn't seen it. Only our guest had, Louise Ward, who I would have given some pushback on if I'd seen this at the time, but she was kind of making out that Jessie Buckley's overacting and that she wouldn't really deserve the Oscar like some others, but I don't know, I thought she was exceptional. It's not exactly unbelievable to me that someone would wail in pain as their child just passed away, and she completely sells it to me. And the other critique that was brought up was that the Paul Mescal character was framed as if he wasn't Shakespeare, or that it's some kind of Marvel reveal that he is at some point. But I just didn't get that impression at all. If it was a surprise, I don't know why it would be in every description of the film. My example of that being an issue would more so be the dialogue, like him coming up with to be or not to be and trying to capture those eureka moments. So an ambitious, heavy movie, emotionally intense, but can't quite maintain it for the whole thing for me. Really torn on a rating. Kind of starts as a 4-star for me and just kind of slowly goes down as certain decisions are made. So I think I'm currently feeling like a really high 3-star, but I just really didn't enjoy that ending. And it's so important for how you wrap your film up. And I just felt like I was left wanting more. So I think I'm going to give this, 3-star with a like. Lots that's fantastic about it. Maybe this is an issue of that source material, that book. Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know how you felt on the film, if that ending worked for you, if your critiques agree with mine. I'll see you on the next video. Bye!